Happy Valentine's Day, guys. I am weirdly feeling this holiday this year for a couple of reasons. One is that my partner and I, at the end of last year, decided to get engaged. So, yay, romantic first Valentine's Day as a couple, but also my partner and I caught COVID about 2 weeks ago, and if you noticed, I didn't do a video last Monday. It was because we were very ill. And so Valentine's Day is the first day that we are supposed to be able to leave quarantine, finally having gotten a negative test. So I have to say that even though I am definitely feeling the love, I am so ready not to see his face for a little bit today. But anyway, if you guys haven't noticed, I do a lot of romance content now, and I figured that since it's Valentine's Day, I would break down some of my favorite 5-star romances in a couple of categories to give you guys the best of the best if you're feeling an enemies to lovers, if you're feeling something with good writing, if you're feeling a historical. This is gonna be the video for you. Most of these books I have done longer reviews of, so I'm just going to give you like short little shots of them. And if you're interested, you can watch the review for more. If I run out of cards, which is always a problem when I do long list videos, you will find the rest of the links to the requisite reviews down in the description. So without further ado, let's get started. So my first category is the romance trope that I always return to, enemies to lovers. And Michaela and I are doing a discussion about this topic actually at the end of this week. And so if you want to hear me expound about the problems with this genre in a longer video, Michaela and I will be discussing that then. But when done right, I think enemies to lovers is a beautiful, really hilarious discussion on, first impressions and judging people too quickly or too easily. I just really love the genre. It's just great. And so my top 2 5-star romances for this genre are first, You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogle. This was one of my best books the year that I read it, out of over 200 books. And it is weird amalgamation of a second chance and an enemies to lovers. I think it's more enemies to lovers and second chance because in this book, the couple, there is a man and a woman, and they're actually engaged when the book starts. They've only really been together for about 1.5 years or so, and they're getting married, and they are realizing that they don't really know the real other person, and really they don't know themselves as individual people. And so I don't really think it's a second chance because they're still together, and really this is them creating a real relationship for the first time. But the hijinks ensue because the initial premise is that they realize that they don't want to get married because they don't really know or like the other person, but whoever breaks up with the other person is on the hook for all of the non-refundable wedding deposits. And so they each start this war to be the worst version of themselves to try to force the other person to call off the engagement. And it's so funny. I don't normally read romance novels. Again, this is one that I've read multiple times, and every single time it makes me physically laugh out loud, like belly laugh, which no matter how funny your book is something that for me I don't normally do. So I really love this one. It's very funny, it's very cute, and I did do a full review of that if you want more. My other enemies to lovers, I think it is a quintessential recommendation in the genre. I think I see it in every list, but it's The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This is a much more typical enemies to lovers where the man and the woman in this book are working in the same office, and they are just battling it out with each other with office hijinks. And it is being made into a movie as well, and so I know people are like, oh, stop recommending The Hating Game. I'm definitely one of those people, when I see a book recommended this often, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to read it. Please stop talking about this book. But I do have to say that I thought it was one of the sweetest enemies to lovers. Like, once they start finding their way towards each other, just how cute they realize all the miscommunication and the fights have been. I just think it's always recommended for a reason, and so if this is the push you need to finally read it, I do recommend it. I have read other Sally Thorne books and they are not as good, so I don't know what it is about the hating game, but I just think it's a really, really sweet, funny, more prototypical office enemies to lovers, and I did do a full review of that, so you can check that out as well. Now, say you just want a book that is going to make you laugh out loud, and neither of those two books are going to do it for you. That's okay. I have two recommendations for my best laugh out loud books. And one is contemporary and one is historical, so maybe that will help. But the first is the Bromance Book Club by Lyssa Kay Adams. I'm recommending the first book in this video. I've done a review of a later book in the series, but like, this series is just hysterical. The last book in particular, there was an entire plot line about a secret cheese, like underground cheese ring seller. Like, yeah, I mean cheese as in like the dairy product. It's hysterically over the top silly. But in the first book, it's a kind of a second chance where the guy in question is a professional baseball player who thinks there's nothing wrong really in his marriage until he comes home and his wife is like, I want a divorce. And he's like, what? Not realizing really how badly their marriage has fallen apart, and so this gets his butt into gear. He knows that he needs to really fix his behavior to win her back. He doesn't want to lose her, and some teammates and other friends invite him to a secret bro club that they have called the Bromance Book Club, and this is a group of men who get together to read romance novels to figure out how to better get to know or understand the women in their lives. It's a really silly concept. Every single book has like a fake romance novel that goes in between that the guy is reading. Sometimes he takes the absolute wrong lesson from the book. And just the guys in general are hilarious. And there's about 4 of them now. Each of the books follow a different bro from the Bromance Book Club. And they're just really funny. They're hysterical, over the top silly. My historical fiction suggestion for this is Bombshell by Sarah MacLean. Sarah MacLean will come up again in this video because I think she is the queen of historical romance, but she just started a new series called Hell's Bells, and the first book is called Bombshell. Again, did a full review of that you can check out, but why this one is so funny is because this is in the way that Bromance Book Club is like a group of dudes pulling off some hijinks, Bombshells is a group of women who society in this historical English, romance has basically cast aside. They're wallflowers, they're too smart to be good society women, or they just don't care about society's rules, and they get together to pull some hijinks on bad men in society that society is not calling to account because they're dukes or they have power, they have money in some way. And so while this one follows Cecily, who is a character from one of Sarah MacLean's other series that I really love, I actually think that the rest of the women in this will be even better. One of them is she's a nerd, and in particular she knows how to make bombs and other explosive devices, and at one point in this book she blows stuff up. And I just think that this series, it's already hilarious what these women get up to, and then no one thinks that it was them because they're like, oh, you're just women, and they're like, yeah, wonder who did that. I think this whole series is going to be really great, and I recommend it. I recommend any of Sarah McLean's books, but this one in particular was just like really hilarious feminist hijinks. So I've talked about some books that are funny and good tropes, but I do want to call attention to two books that I gave 5 stars because of the relationships in them. And I don't see this just as the romantic relationships, that's definitely a part of it, but I am a huge fan of romance novels that are larger than the romantic pairing. And I just think that a good romance novel understands that love doesn't fix everything. We are complicated people and there are other things happening. So with that aside, I do want to say the first one is the third book in a series. It's the Hot and Hammered series by Tessa Bailey. I did a whole series review, but the third book in particular, which is called Tools of Engagement, is just, I think, the most satisfying series conclusion and some of the best relationship building that I've really seen. I gave it 5 stars for that reason. So the Hot and Hammered Tools of Engagement, the main family at the center of this series, they flip houses. So they buy abandoned or falling down houses, rebuild them, make them beautiful, stage them, and then sell them. And that's why there's tons of tool jokes. And the third book focuses on the sister, the older sister. There's a younger sister, a brother, and then the older sister. And in the first 2 books, she's a very present character who is like the ice queen, right? She's blonde, she's beautiful, she's perfect. She stages the houses. So her literal job is to go into these houses and make them beautiful. And it's clear, especially the younger sister feels very insecure about living up to her legacy. And so you've built up an idea about this character in the first 2 books. And so when you get to the third book, and again, this is a little spoilery, I don't think it's drastic, but you get to the third book and you realize there is so much going on underneath the surface of this character that you can see in hindsight. I think that this is just written so well into the whole series, and it is so great when this character then starts to enjoy her own journey of personal growth, because the anxiety, the other issues, she's just growing as a person, and it's just been built up really well for you. The guy partner in this, he's a little bit younger. He is raising this child of his foster sister. So he never meant to be a father. He doesn't know how to do this. He's trying to raise a kid who he's not really blood related to, who doesn't really get why her own mother isn't a part of her life. And so that is really sweet and wonderful, because he is trying so hard to be good for her and then to be good for the female main character as well on her own journey, but he's having his own. Them getting together doesn't fix everything, but they just create a solid and stable life together. It's very sweet. I love it. And you can just read that book if you're interested, but I do feel like the build-up across the entire series is really what sells that book really well. The other one that I want to mention is How to Fail at Flirting by Denise Williams. This was Denise Williams's debut novel. Did a whole review of it. And again, the year that I read it, it was one of the best books that I read that year. And How to Fail at Flirting seems like a very basic romance novel at the front. There is the female lead, and she is a professor. She's been out of the game for a while, and she just doesn't get how to flirt. So a friend challenges her to get out of her element, and so she ends up flirting very badly with this guy at a bar, and then come to find out that the guy at the bar that she flirts with and has a one-night stand with is a guy who was coming into her university to make decisions on what members of her faculty department to cut. And so I read that and I was like, ugh, I know how this book's gonna go. It seems like a fairly basic story, but in what I have come to realize is Denise Williams's kind of calling card, having also read her second book, is that I think she is one of the best authors I've read to write a book with so many complicated things going on in each person's individual life, and then having them come together. In particular, this book does deal with emotional and physical abuse. So if that is not in your wheelhouse, you will want to avoid it, but it just ends up being such a deeper and more emotional and just a really incredible love story, and an incredible story of two people growing and learning through their own problems. So highly recommend any of Denise Williams's books for your reading pleasure. So I don't read a lot of historical fiction anymore, but when I first started reading romance novels, that was like my thing. And I've already mentioned Sarah McLean, and I have to say that again, anything by her is amazing, but I have reread so many times her book, The Day of the Duchess, which is technically a third book in a series that she wrote. All of her series are actually interconnected, which I didn't realize. I kind of read them a little bit out of order, but that's fine. It's okay. But The Day of the Duchess is the story of a duke and the woman that he marries, and they fall in love, but her family, they're not ennobled, but they have a lot of money. And so he comes to believe that she has entrapped him into marriage. And so they fall in love, but then they're immediately out of love by the time they get married. And right after their marriage, when she realizes that he will not forgive her, she disappears. And several years later, when the book really begins, she reappears in the House of Lords to ask for a divorce. And so he says, I will grant you a divorce, but you have to find my new wife for me, in an attempt to get her to come home with him and fix their marriage. And she's like, nah, I don't want this no more. And so she agrees. So it's like this very bizarre, like, she thinks she's running the Bachelorette and he's trying to get rid of the Bachelorettes to get her to give him a second chance. It's incredibly emotional. It's funny. I love it. It is so good. If you don't want to read Sarah McLean, or you've already read everything that she's written, I also highly recommend Tessa Dare. Tessa Dare has written a number of incredible books, but I think the best series is her Duchess series. I don't know why there's a lot of Duchesses involved, but the first book is the Duchess Dare, which is on the surface a quintessential Cinderella story. There is a duke in need of a duchess. He dares this woman that he can make her into someone who is duchess worthy. She needs the money. She says yes. They fall in love. But Tessa Dare, in all of the books in the series, has a way of elevating those tropes and writing really amazing, funny, cute novels. And I have to say that I think the fourth book in this series, which is not out yet, is going to be the best one, but the publishing date is getting pushed back, and I need it, because you find out there's like a quartet of women at the center of these stories, and that's the last one, you know, her story, and you find out that she's actually been like promised to a duke this whole time, despite being the one who's always like, no romance, no marriage. So I can't wait for that book. I really, really want it. So finally, to finish off these 5-star reads with 5 separate categories, I of course have to tell you about the ones with the best spice, obviously. So starting off, I want to talk about Christina Loren's Beautiful series. The first book is Beautiful Bastard, and let me tell you, I was actually reading this at work on my lunch break with another coworker in the office with me who was also on lunch, and I'm just like having my food, and I'm pretty sure by page 5, this enemies to lovers first novel, they were anger banging in the stairwell. And I literally remember this because I looked up and I looked at my coworker and I went, because she also reads romance novels, and I went, It's page 5 and they're having sex. Was there a story in here? Is this just a spice novel? These novels are very spicy. They're also hilarious, and I think it's a series that from the first book gets better as it goes on, so I highly recommend it. But I just remember like laughing, like how were they already anger banging in the stairwell? She works for him, he's the ice cold boss type and she's the fiery assistant. It's that whole thing. But it was just that I think is the record for the fastest I've ever seen a couple have sex in a romance novel. So definitely that. And if you're looking for something a little bit on the darker side, I know I get very sick of office romances very fast. Ronnie Lauren, why do they have similar last names? I'm just realizing. Anyway, Ronnie Lauren has an amazing series called Loving on the Edge, which are all different BDSM inspired stories. And they have all manner of kinks in them. There are 2 different books on triads. There are also related novellas which tell smaller stories. It's a long list of books that you can really dig into. I don't think they have to be read in a particular order, but they're very, very spicy and also very, very sweet. And I really enjoy them. And nothing that Ronnie Lauren has written since then I've really been as attached to as those. But if that is something that you would rather have as a spicy version rather than another office romance, this is a really good series and I highly recommend those as well. All right, guys, that is 5 sets of 5-star romances for your reading pleasure. I hope that you have a great Valentine's Day or a great rest of your week, or at least you don't get COVID, because let me tell you, I have not been having a good time. But I have been reading tons of romance novels to keep myself happy, and so I hope through this video to have spread the happiness to you. If you have recommendations for me, as always, leave them down in the comments, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!